One important way to do that is to understand how people listen to the radio. And you'll hear your program director talk about time spent listening. And they will use statistics that come from the rating services that tell them, on average, how much time is the average person spending listening at one time, at one sitting, to your program. Most of your audience is at best spending 20 minutes at a time listening to your show. Now that's an average. That doesn't mean that somebody isn't on a long road trip and listening for an hour and a half. Doesn't mean that they're making a dinner in the kitchen and they're not listening for an hour and enjoying your program. But statistically, by far, most people, because of the way they live their lives, right? They're driving around town, taking kids to school, getting their breakfast ready. They're by a radio for a little while, but it's not a long time listening experience. So what am I talking about here? Your show is less like a Pink Floyd concert than it is a program at a community park where there's a band shell. Well, what's a Pink Floyd concert like? All right, elements of a Pink Floyd concert. People are paying money, usually a lot of money, for it. They arrive early for it. They wait in anticipation for it. They sit through the whole thing and they listen hard to every detail. All right, I think that an issue with a lot of music programmers is that they believe that when they start their show that people are settling in for a concert performance. They're not. Doesn't mean that there's nobody who's looking forward to it and is so into your show that they're not going to sit or that they are going to sit and listen. There are people like that. Statistically, not many of them. So to program to those people is not programming to the 90% or more of the rest of your audience. And you wouldn't do that as a performer, if you were, say, a singer-songwriter or something like that. So your show is more like a free concert on the plaza in your community, meaning that people see it as free, for one thing, right? There's music in the band shell. Oh, let me go over there. Most drop in for a part of it. Many leave after 20 minutes, and most do other things while they're listening. This is the reality of how our programs are consumed as we are putting them out there. It's just so very important for you to realize that, not to get depressed about it and say that, well, people aren't really paying attention. At times they're paying acute attention, but in general, it's more of a transitory experience. All right, so how does that possibly influence your programming? Thinking of it less like a 2 to 3 hour symphony that someone's paid a lot for. It's really a radio program that people are dropping in and out of, and you should be announcing accordingly. So let's talk about how that might be done. On this slide here, we see songs in 2 song sets that I've just sketched out from a recent show that I did. And we're going to use these as a reference, but as you look at them, think about different ways that you might announce these sets. First of all, it would be very common at many public radio stations to play all 9 of these songs in one long 30-minute set. What I'm proposing, first of all, is for you to think about shortening your music sets. The main advantage to this is for you to be able to help the listener consume these songs in a way that's helpful to them. If you do it old school and play all these 9 songs together and say, end with Joni Mitchell's California, then you're going to fall back into this trap of giving a long list. And typically this is how it used to be done, right? Or would be done still. That was Joni Mitchell's California, and before that, Rufus Wainwright. Before that, it was Red Hot Chili Peppers with their Donnie California. We also heard U2's California, There's No End to Love. Before that, James McMurtry from a new album, How Am I Gonna Find You Now? We heard from Bill Miller also, and before that, it was Louis Armstrong's Broken Heart from Eric Taylor. I don't even have to go on, right? But you've heard these kind of or of talk breaks. And just imagine, first of all, is that somebody has joined you at the very end of that set. frankly, you're wasting their time by telling them all the songs that were ahead of that because they didn't hear them. All right, so you want to improve the chances that what you're saying is reaching people who were actually there for the performance. It would be like somebody at a band shell doing their whole set, and then at the end of their 30-minute set saying, let me tell you about all the songs we played for you today here in the park. You know, they wouldn't do it that way. You know, they usually talk about their songs one by one. Well, that defeats part of the purpose and fun of making a music set. But you do see the value, perhaps, of shrinking these sets. So I think 5 songs is like a perfect song set. It allows you to be a little creative with your segues, with your themes. And so what I've sketched out here are 2 sets. One is sort of an eclectic set, and the other one is a theme set where you've picked 4 songs about California. So just imagine that the pleasure of being more likely to have heard these 5 songs and then you taking a short pause to talk about them. So how would that sound? We'll talk about that in a moment, but I just want you to look at this first, and then let me offer these ideas about how best to do it. I want to suggest that as much as possible, you lead with your heart. You lead with your personal experience, and you lead with your passion, because these are also the things that listeners truly, truly can't get anywhere else. They can't get that from a endless play on Spotify or Pandora. They can't get it when they set YouTube to just pick songs that are similar to the one that they started out with. And that is the best place that you can go, I think, in talking about the music that you're playing. I'll give you an example of that here in a moment as well. As you come out of a set, say the most about what just played and less about each song going back up the list. Because remember the Plaza Concert idea. People are coming and going, and frankly, their experience of hearing the most recent song is the most complete. The ones you're talking to are the ones that are statistically more likely to have heard that whole song from start to finish. So you referring to it in a detailed way is a very complete, creative, storytelling, appreciable, if that's a word, appreciable experience. Now, as you go back up a list, and I'm going to give you an example of this here in a moment, but as you go back up the list of songs in a set, I think artist and title are still important. But detailed stories about those songs as they get further up the list back into the past are a little bit less impactful for a couple of reasons. One is that some people haven't heard that song that have tuned in, and the ones that have heard it, again, have that issue of like, which song are they talking about exactly? I don't mean don't tell any stories about them, but tell less about those songs than the one that is finishing your set. But if our job is to help people find this great music, whether it's old or new, it is important to be very specific to say the artist, the title, maybe the album. Artist, title, still very important. And I want to remind you, because so often on public radio, you don't hear the call letters of the radio station. Now, this could be seen as a convention that is borrowed from commercial radio, and in a way it is. Now, commercial radios beat you over the head with their slogans and call letters. They will drop them in between every song. If the announcer isn't saying them, then some big voiced recorded person is saying, you know, KLSK, classic rock. So somewhere in between there is the way that you claim credit, help the station claim credit for this amazing programming that you're doing. So many times you'll listen to a freeform show on a public radio station, and I mean, you know maybe what the call letters are, but imagine somebody who just moved to town and found this station on the dial and are listening. You know, they don't know, what is this? I heard something on the radio, I have no idea where it came from. So take pride in your call letters. You don't have to overdo it, but the listener knowing where all this extraordinariness is coming from, I think that is a word I made up, is good. So near the beginning of your talk, after music, and the last thing listeners hear before music resumes, are good places to put the call letters. Because in a way you can stamp it and then get on to business, and then stamp it again right before the music starts. And you don't have to do that in a commercial way. You can just do it in a very comfortable way.